All right, everybody, thanks for joining in. Good afternoon. My name is Asa Spaziani. I'm one of the founding members of CGAO. It's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome you guys to today's webinar. It's proudly sponsored by Mapped Out GIS Services. I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Brandon Harris, Director of Marketing and Sales at Bruce Harris & Associates. Many of you already may be familiar with Bruce Harris & Associates, either through some direct collaboration or by their reputation within this industry. In today's presentation, Mr. Harris will be providing an insightful overview of the evolving landscape in mapping and GIS, highlighting key industry transformations, some of the emerging trends, and the implications that those changes will have on our work and our future direction. We're grateful for the participation today, guys. Looks like we've got 7 or so, maybe some more will trickle in. Without further ado, I'll turn everything over to Brandon.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Glad we worked through the technical difficulties. I'm not going to lie. I'm a creature of Zoom. And so I don't know Teams nearly as well as I know Zoom, but I'm glad we got it figured out. So thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled and honored to be able to come and participate with this great organization. Gabriel and Asa, thank you guys for making this happen and helping to do this. So without further ado, I'll get into my presentation. Like Asa said, I'm going to talk just about some of the kind of technology changes we're seeing, things that are affecting the GIS industry. There's a lot of change that's been going on over the last few years. And I kind of wanted to just focus on some of that and talk through what we're seeing and what's really out there affecting the industry. So I'll bring up my presentation. And what I would ask is, since we do have sort of a, since we have a smaller group today, let's keep this sort of informal, and you guys, when you have questions or anything like that, just feel free to kind of interject, and we'll have a little bit of an informal conversation here. So I always like when we can do that. So let me share my screen, and then we'll get started on this. Okay, so can you see me okay here? Can you see the screen? I'm going to go full screen here. All right. If for any reason you can't see my screen right now, somebody speak up, because now that's all I see. So I don't see your videos. But yeah, so what we're going to talk about today is kind of industry updates, changes we're seeing, overarching changes in GIS. They're kind of affecting everybody. So I'll talk a little bit about who we are, give you a little background, and then kind of go through what we're going to cover today. So again, I want to thank the CGAO organization for having me here today. I think it's a wonderful organization to have colleagues kind of getting together and working together. I work in a lot of different states and a lot of different areas. And honestly, when, we're not always trying to reinvent the wheel, but learning from our colleagues and seeing what our peers are doing, I've seen that there's just tremendous gains from that. So I'm really glad to see this organization and proud to be here to help support it. So that being said, a little background on who I am and who Bruce Harris & Associates is. So Bruce Harris & Associates is a land records GIS company. This is our 30th anniversary actually this year. So we've been 30 years of providing land record solutions to local government. We are not a engineering firm that has a small GIS part, or we're not a private equity, extension or roll up. We're the same company we've always been. And our core business is land records for local government. So we do everything from parcel mapping to application development, consulting, training, etc. We are located in Batavia, Illinois. So if you were to follow this pin straight east, you'd run into downtown Chicago. We're along the Fox River here, located right on the river in about an hour straight west of downtown Chicago. So as I mentioned, we are one of the nation's leading providers of GIS services. We're currently in the process of simultaneously remapping over 1.2 million parcels for counties right now. So we love what we do. We get into this, we have people that are GIS, total GIS nerds. So, we don't care about calling ourselves that, because we love what we do. And we love to share what we've learned, and kind of, we always joke that Esri is phenomenal at building the software, but sometimes you need a little help in explaining everything they're doing and what it all means. So we pride ourselves on being able to kind of bring that to the client and break it down. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to look at these changes in the industry that are affecting your organization. And we're going to look at the technology kind of underlying that, what it means and what those migration considerations are, how it affects your organization with these retirements and end of support and those kind of things. What I'm guessing, because in my experience, what I've seen is there's been a heavy focus on talking about ArcGIS Pro. And I feel like every conference I've been at, there's been a lot of discussion on that. So I'm not going to focus as much on that. I think everybody's aware that there's this shift to Pro. What I'm going to focus on a little bit more is kind of the user experience side, that public engagement with the websites and having web maps and how that's changed from Web App Builder to Experience Builder. And we're going to get a little into what Experience Builder is. I'll show an example of that with an Ohio site of how we've used Experience Builder. And then we're going to get into just kind of a little bit of some of the other changes we're seeing, which are sort of Esri changing user types, which has already happened, but it's still something that people are kind of consuming now and migrating and understanding these changes. So I want to talk about that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a nationwide trend I'm seeing in staffing. So that's a little bit of the roadmap of what this presentation is going to cover. And like I said, let's have, a discussion. So if anybody has any questions as I'm going, feel free to interject. All right, so a couple big changes ahead, and we're going to talk about what that looks like and what the roadmap looks like. So I mentioned, ArcGIS Desktop is currently in the process of retirement, right? We are migrating to ArcGIS Pro. And as I mentioned, I'm not going to focus as much on that. We can kind of talk about that deeper in the discussion at the end when we do questions if you guys want, but I'm going to focus a little more on this retirement of the ArcGIS API 3.x for JavaScript and what that kind of means. So with these two big systems, these two big pieces that we've been using for a really long time retiring, the question I get is, what does it mean? What does it mean to my organization? What does it mean to the current applications that we have? And what does it mean to our long-term roadmap, right? What's the plan going forward? A question I get is, can we still use our old apps built on Web App Builder? Can I still serve a website that I have once they retire this? Can we still use our GIS Desktop? And what does retirement actually mean? So let's start with that, and then we'll get into a little more low-level what these things are. So retirement, if I can put it in a nutshell, and I'm going to just really simplify this, but basically what retirement means is it's a use at your own risk period. Okay, so we are already in mature support for some of these things, right? Retirement for a lot of these was July of 2024. And now we're in this mature support phase. And what that means is that basically they're not doing patches and bug fixes or updates. No more enhancements or development to the API. And then that support, right? We're in mature support, and pretty soon there's going to be no support, meaning that if something breaks, you're on your own. So I know we're not going to get super into Pro, but like a consideration for people that are in the mapping departments or in the auditor's office, if you're responsible for the line work and the parcels, if you're not in the Pro parcel fabric, that is Esri's main kind of, model going forward is this parcel fabric model. You can go into Pro without being in the parcel fabric, but when you go to get support from Esri, they're going to say, are you using parcel fabric as we recommended? And when you say no, okay, well, we can help you so much, but we're not really responsible for what you're doing outside of that. So your support is going to change based on whether or not you're doing exactly what Esri's kind of pushing forward in this roadmap. But that's not necessarily to say you can't do that, right? It's just then there's some things you're going to have to maintain, or if things break, then there's potential risks. I think one of the biggest things that we need to consider is I just got back from a conference in Ohio, and there was 2 counties we talked to that have been dealing with ransomware. Okay. We know that there's insidious things out there constantly sort of trying to stay one step ahead. I got bills from a conference. It's a very legitimate conference. I got bills from a county that looked legitimate, and there's total scam, fake, documents that if you click them, it looks legit. So there's all these things that are out there, these insidious factors that are trying to get in and hack into your organizations, into our daily lives, and running unsupported software that's not getting updates and security updates and patches is usually frowned upon within our organization. So if you're trying to talk to, I've seen where a few times you have analysts or somebody doing the work, and they're trying to preach to their administration that we need to do this. Well, what I found is that if you're trying to say, hey, it's the new technology, we need to migrate, blah, 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 that doesn't resonate as much by saying, hey, we're going to be running unsupported and there's a security risk within our organization. That typically IT, your DBA, whoever's running that at your organization is not going to want you to be running something that's unsupported. So that's a big thing. The other thing is as we're running these web applications, right, and we're not getting these software updates, these browser updates, things like that, what can happen is we're using Chrome. I'm just going to use Chrome as an example. Bing, whatever browser you're using, let's say they have an update and it breaks something. Esri's not going to go back and fix that to work with that browser and be compatible. So we're also kind of running this risky volatility where something could just crash on us and go down, and that's outside of our control. And what I always say, I think everybody kind of can understand that when we're retroactively trying to solve a problem, house on fire, because this public website that everybody uses just went down and we don't have something to put up in its place, that's much more of a scramble, and it's usually a lot more cost prohibitive than planning and being ready for this. There's usually things missed because they're rushed to get it out. Then you're going back and trying to fix things retroactively. It's never as good. So we know this roadmap's here. Most of your organizations should already be aware of this. And probably some of you are already, either transitioning those apps, you've transitioned them, or you're at least exploring it. And that's what we would hope. But it's shocking. I still come across organizations constantly today that have not put a plan together to migrate to Pro and have not put a plan together to migrate their applications. And if you go and you read in the blogs, you're hearing it. People are like, oh, it's just we upgraded our portal to 11.1. We upgraded from 10.8, and everything in Web App Builder broke, right? You don't want to be, we all know, you don't want to be house on fire or retroactively trying to fix things that went down. So there is a planning period here that you can really be planning for this. And what we found in the technology, so I'll get into that, is that the migration path is not super straightforward. What we've really found is that, I'll get into this, but you're better off just taking the experience builder and rebuilding the apps. So again, let's look at a little closer at the technology when we're talking about this web app builder to experience builder migration. Web app builder was based on this ArcGIS API 3.x for JavaScript. It was retired July 1st, 2024, and is now currently in mature support, which ends very soon. And then as of 2026, they're saying it will no longer be there. Your developer edition, all these things will be gone. All right. And what this JavaScript API really is, it's a developer toolkit for making mapping and spatial analysis web applications. So it's designed to work optimally with the ArcGIS system. And it's the framework that we have based all the applications that are out there internally and externally that have web maps in them. They're built on that. So what Esri is doing is replacing it. And if you look at it, this 3.x has been around for like 15 years. That's really kind of old in a technology standpoint. So it was pretty much due for a replacement. And the reason it's being replaced is because it's more powerful, more modern. And of course, we're coming into a world where 3D is becoming more and more prevalent. So Esri needed to make sure that their software can handle these new 3D landscapes, the 3D capabilities that we are starting to see in our maps and even in our public-facing applications. So that was a big driving part of why they needed to upgrade this. So now we are moving to this JavaScript 4.x, right? The API 4.x for JavaScript. And what we're hearing it referred to, the common term with Esri, although no knock to Esri, but as we know, just when you get comfortable, then they rename everything and change it. So as of now, it's called ArcGIS Maps SDK for JavaScript. So that's the current experience builder toolkit that everything will be built off of. All right. And again, the old one, 3.x, was about 15 years old. So it really makes sense to start replacing that, because in the world of technology, 15 years is like, a lifetime. So what products it affects? It affects all the web app builder applications. So for our GIS Online, Web App Builder and Enterprise, and Web App Builder Developer Edition. Okay. So and you're gonna have to forgive my typo. I put addition, like addition subtraction is supposed to be addition. So that's one I'll have to go in there and correct. So, but what this means is it's affecting everything. You can see some of them are a little longer time frame. Everything's pretty much in mature support, retiring this year or has retired. And then like Web App Builder Enterprise is first half of 2025. We're at that first half of 2025, right? So we're right at where these things are ending. Okay. Now Esri usually trickles that a little bit and lets people migrate, but they've been posting this for a while. So at a certain point, they're going to cut it off, and then those things will stop working. Okay. Now, what I was saying earlier about, the question came, well, can we just take our our web applications that are in Web App Builder and just kind of migrate those to Experience Builder and maybe update some things in the code and send them over? I'm not going to say you can't do that, but what we found is there was enough differences that it didn't make it a really smooth transition to try and carry forward existing apps. And there's also some of functionality that just hasn't been added to Experience Builder yet. So what we found is that really you're better off just kind of taking the Experience Builder platform and rebuilding these apps. And there's a lot of functionality. Like, we've been very happy with what the Experience Builder system and platform is. It just takes, like anything, right, a little getting used to and a little getting familiar. This is a link I have, so we can go in, and Esri has. Can you see this screen I just shared?
We're still in your presentation, Brandon.
Okay, do you see?
There it is.
Okay, so this is a functionality matrix that Esri put out, and it basically just gives you, so you can Google, Esri's got a lot of resources, a lot of documentation out there. So if you Google anything, you can just Google like Web App Builder, functionality matrix. And this has basically any gaps, like if it doesn't, what Web App Builder had, whether it's in Experience Builder, when it'll be released, etc. So there's path, for migrations that you can go into that are unplanned widgets, but you can kind of see everywhere. There's still some things that haven't been ported over. I mean, I'll show you guys an example here, but 90% of it is you're able to, 90% of it you're able to, just go right over and match that functionality. But if there is some stuff that you're using that isn't there, you can see the roadmap of when it'll be there. What I can tell you is this is what it is going forward for Esri. Okay, so they will be, and let me get back to the sharing, sorry. So Esri will be putting all their horsepower into this new platform. Okay, so the Experience Builder, if that functionality is not there at the moment, it will be, right? Because everything they're doing, they're not developing anything further for Web App Builder. They have Esri's huge, right? Huge team of developers, huge team of analysts and solution engineers that work on this kind of stuff. So all their horsepower going forward is going to be to support Experience Builder. So I've kind of told clients, like, hey, there was an issue with aerial photography not being able to get in. We couldn't get pictometry widgets. You couldn't get that at first. It's like, trust me, this isn't going to be something that's going to go long term. Those aerial companies want this in. Esri wants it in. It's going to happen. And then, of course, it didn't take very long before we could consume that. So you're going to continually see these enhancements, these functionality additions to Experience Builder as we make that migration. Here's your icons. So they're very similar. I always throw this quote in. It's kind of a silly quote, but if you want something new, you have to stop doing something old, right? Peter Drucker, father of modern management, somebody a lot of people follow, but it's kind of that simple idea, right? There's hesitation. We've seen people with Pro and Pro Fabric. Oh, we've got people in the office who don't want to learn a new system. What I find is that's typically holding you back. This is where everything's going. We're going to have to move to it. If you know, when we've seen people migrate to Pro Fabric, we have absolutely seen efficiencies across the board. Every vendor I talk to that is migrating people, it's like this sort of initial period where it's like, hey, oh wait, this is totally different. This is taking me longer. And then all of a sudden there's this, I got it. Okay. Moment where the efficiencies catch on, the workflows catch on, and people never look back. And so we do have to kind of get away from the old and get used to the new, because this is what's happening around us. This isn't something we're doing. This is, it's an industry change, and it's technology and Esri. And so we just have to sort of embrace it and take this new. But, what we found is there is this path forward has a lot of things that are going to be better. There's still some things working out, but all in all, we are moving to more modern capabilities. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what Experience Builder is. We've talked about the back-end tools that this is migrating, that we're going to have to be using this. So, for those of you who aren't familiar, and again, Pro, I was thinking about this. I know this is kind of this group, in this organization isn't just auditors, right? There's people from all sorts of different GIS backgrounds and GIS departments. And where Pro really, everybody, the migration to Pro, yes, affects everybody, but Pro Fabric is really the people that are editing line work and editing cadastral data, right? Whereas this migration, I think, affects every GIS department, because everybody uses applications that have maps in them if you're in GIS, whether it's public facing or internal. So this isn't just affecting the system of record and the people creating the maps. This Experience Builder will affect everybody using GIS, the public, the consumers, the builders, and everybody. So I thought this is, a little more worth focusing on. So, again, Experience Builder is this new modern tool to develop web applications. And as I mentioned, it's more powerful and 3D capable than Web App Builder. However, there's a lot of the components of Web App Builder that still have been ported over. So certain themes, certain things that you were able to use in Web App Builder, widgets, there's a lot of familiarity, just a lot more capability. So what we saw with field maps, we kind of saw Esri took a bunch of standalone apps and then combined it into one. So they took like Collector and Navigator and all these different things, and then just combined them into field maps to make it easier. It's kind of what they're doing here, right? We're taking a bunch of capability that we can now put into one. So we can access open data, dashboards, web apps, hubs, all these things from Experience Builder, and kind of synthesize a bunch of systems into one, which is really nice. All right, so there's a gallery out there. You can click, I'm not going to go to it at this point because I want to keep moving for time's sake, but this is just an Esri gallery. So you can go in and there's tons of already built Experience Builder sites out there that you can look at and kind of get a feel. All right, but Experience Builder is based upon these 5 building blocks that make it up. So we have pages, huge difference from Web App Builder. Web App Builder is a one-page web application, where Experience Builder allows us to do multi-page sites. So we can get a lot more complexity in the websites that we're building through this, a lot more complete and full, robust websites, not just one mapping page, but now multiple sites pages we can embed into this site. Then there's templates. So the templates are the look and feel. There's a bunch of pre-canned templates, and if you're using Developer Edition, then you can create your own. There's themes, same idea. The kind of how it feels. There's canned themes. There's the data component, right? Where we're consuming data from. There's a lot more options in how we bring the data in. And then, of course, there's widgets, right? The functionality and the tools we put in. These are the 5 building blocks that basically make up what Experience Builder is. And we'll look at each of these 5 building blocks really high level real quick. So we have these templates. Like I said, you got templates that are going to feel very much like Web App Builder. If you can see here, we have Web App Builder Classic, right? But there's templates from our organization, and then there's just a ton of existing templates out there. So you have that like Launchpad style, accordion, but it's nice because, you can give a different look and feel based on what sort of web experience you're trying to build. And there's just ready to go templates that sort of lay it out and organize it for us. And then we can get into our own, but there's, really good jumping off points to get us started. As I mentioned, we can do these pages. So we can come in and we can start doing multiple pages. So we can have sort of a landing page with information and then, dive deeper into that to go into the web applications and then, or link to other, not link, but have other pages and other functionality within this that we can use. And you can see this is sort of the back end of it where we're building the site. And so we can create multiple pages, add them there, and then the page layout, you can have all these components. And so it's really nice that you have this functionality and that ability to add. So these are just a couple of the themes, but you can see, so you can kind of style it how you want. Dark mode, vivid, you can have that newspaper ink look. Again, to give it some customization and style that feels unique, so we don't all have the exact same looking, for those of you who built, any of the old, web app builder parcel viewers, right? They were all sort of look the same. They kind of, you could tell right away when you got into one of those Esri out of the box. I think there's a lot more flexibility now to give it some customization, make it look and feel your own without having to actually go in and do hard-coded customization, right? So then there's the data sources. So this is kind of cool. We have a bunch of options on where we add data from, right? So we can pull it from our organization, ArcGIS Online, the Living Atlas. You have those standard options, and then we can bring them in through like layers. We get URL, web map services. So, we can connect to data from a lot of different sources now and bring it in. One of the things I love, and I'll show you, is there's an option to just for a user, I'll show you in just a moment here, but to bring in their own data in their, user session and sort of have this ability to just bring in their own data, lay it into the map, and then play with it. So I'll show that here in just a moment. And finally, of course, there's widgets, right? So a bunch of functionality that's already built, common things that we use, right? So map layers, toolboxes, coordinates, data-centric widgets. They're kind of all organized in sort of, what like data, map-centric, page elements, etc. But there's a ton of existing widgets out there to go grab. So building these sites, it takes a little getting used to if you've never done it. It's not quite exactly like Web App Builder, but there's a lot to it. And once you get in, they're fairly easy to get a lot of this functionality stood up fairly quickly. So a lot of great widgets. And then, of course, if you have somebody, depending on the resources within your organization, or if you have a vendor that you use that builds this, you can build custom widgets as well. But there's a ton of already existing ones that cover a lot of the functionality you're going to need. So real quick, I'll give a quick example. So this is we call this Reach, and we just had to come up with a name for our Experience Builder product. So Reach is an acronym for Real Estate Assessment Community Hub. So that's really what when we're developing for a lot of our local government clients, it's sort of the parcel search, the tax information. I've heard the acronym FIRE before: finance, insurance, and real estate. These are those heavy hitters that use this information, need that cadastral records, mortgage lenders, title. A lot of times that's our users, and then the neighbors who want to know what you're paying in taxes, kind of thing, right? So we had Web App Builder sites that really covered those main, that main functionality needed in that office. And then so for years we've done that. So we just wanted to bring over kind of that same functionality into Experience Builder. And this just gives you a quick high level look. So we have the full screen map. We have Esri's base maps embedded in. So there's, a whole bunch of different, base map options we can use, kind of like those themes we talked about. But if you wanted to change it on the fly and make your base map blueprint or, whatever you wanted, you have a ton of options in here, as you can see scrolling through there. I won't go through every piece of functionality, but I'll show a couple highlights. So you have elevation widget. So this is one of the things that's really cool, is that there's there's a lot more kind of interaction between Esri standalone apps and these experience builder sites. So I can just take existing Esri functionality, bring it into the site. So this is an app. They have this elevation finder, and I can just go in and use it and interact with my map dynamically, which is really nice. And I'll just kind of zoom in here and find a quick example. So it's usually good in hilly areas to really show you elevation. But what I can do is, click any point on the map and then come here and get my elevation. And it's just going to give me an elevation profile. I can go, anywhere along this line and see, I can move it. I can move to points along it and get these, elevation statistics. I can actually pull in, reverse it, flip it. I can pull statistics off of it, but it's just this application that's out there that now is seamlessly working with the data in my map. So other ways we can think about that is let's say I wanted to put survey 123 in, and a person clicks on their parcel, and then we want to have them report blight, just as an example. But we can have it so when they click on it from their parcel, it can consume all that information from their the CAM information, all their parcel information, name, location, and fill out the survey with that. So all they got to do is type in what the blight is, and now it's connected. So there's just this ability to connect all these different applications now in one place and make them work seamlessly together and dynamic with the map.
Hey,
that's
Brandon,
really, yeah.
Quick interruption. We couldn't see the app. We were still on your one screen. Can you run through that real quick again?
You're not seeing the,
We've got the reach. There we go.
My apologies. Sorry. Again, the sharing is a little different. I'm so used to Zoom. So now can you see everything here?
Yeah. And the chat is going to be active this whole time for questions. If anybody kind of pops in there, just keep your eyes on that.
Okay. And I can come back and go through it once we're done, because I'm on a different screen. So I'll come back or if you see chats coming through, Asa, if you want to shout any questions to me, that's fine too.
Yep.
But yeah, so this much better when you can actually see what I'm showing. But this is this elevation app, right? It allows us to just come right in and create these elevation points. And really this is useful for a lot of utility, public works, engineering, but it's just nice to have it. And the cool thing with this is it just shows the possibilities, right? Of being able to plug this in and pull this information off the map dynamically into these other apps. Another one I really like is this add data. So per user session, if you have somebody who has any sort of, GIS savvy, or a user who has their own data set, I can come in here. Let's say I, was from a utility company and I had a point file that I wanted to see and overlay that. Well, we can come in and there's all these options for adding data. So I can search from ArcGIS Online and bring in data from the web. I can go in if I have a URL and I want to, have a service that I want to pull data in from, or even if I have like a shapefile or a CVS that I want to pull in and pull those location points. It's really nice because now I can just do that, add that data to this map, and then do some quick analysis, see that data in there. And that's another piece of functionality that wasn't there before. That's really kind of cool. And opens up, this now, I think, really useful functionality for GIS users that are, that are not part of the organization and might not have access to these maps, but now can just go in and pull their information, run their own analysis. And when we think about it, that saves time in the office from them not having to call in and request certain stuff. So that's really cool. There's things like coordinate, searches. So I can just, get coordinates on a point and that used to be something you couldn't always do, and get in and get your coordinates, Web Mercator here. So if I'm getting coordinates, I can find those based off of here, or I can, if I have an engineer and I need to give them coordinates, I can pull them off of this as well. And those are some of the cool things. I'm going to show really quickly. We have another thing we have is these tutorials. So anytime you're changing something or using something new, as we know, the public, even if it's for the better, can get a little finicky. So we have videos, in here that kind of show each widget, how to use it, what you're doing. We feel like that's helped a lot. And then what I'll do really quick is I just want to show, let's see here. I'm going to go to one other site. Okay, so I'm going to share one other one just real quick because I want to show obviously one of the, okay, so this is Vermilion County, Illinois, and I just want to show that some counties don't opt for it, but it's an option here. Can everybody see this tab now, Vermilion? My screen's a little truncated, but I can go into this 3D search here. And right away now we have this 3D capability of the county. So I can come in now and zoom from this, you know, and when you're using your mouse, you can rotate, you know, with your left click kind of, you know, functionality that we're used to, same with like Google Earth. But then I can come in here and click on this 3D building layer now that I'm in 3D and extrapolate that. And it just has this functionality for, this is just kind of an out of the box like the 3D Esri has, but you can put in 3D scenes, you can get complex, you know, if you have this, you know, the building skins on these or advanced, you know, 3D, that can all be populated in this and consumed, and people can go in and click into parcels and get information and have this 3D experience. So we talked about, that's one of the big things and one of the big reasons why, you know, we've seen this migration from 3.x to the, you know, Maps SDK, this new JavaScript 4.x. This is a big part of it. So you can have these 3D landscapes that we're seeing here. So now when you use the elevation tool and you can do it in 3D, it's kind of cool because you can really kind of see that contour as you zoom in, like, oh, okay, here's a ditch. And there we go. Get my, but you can see the line here now as it dips, and you can kind of start to see that 3D. And then as I run in here, you know, you can see your big trenches there. Okay, that's my, you know, so it's just the 3D gives you a whole different viewing experience. And, you know, let's face it, the modern, you know, the kind of public average consumer is sort of starting to expect to see these kind of landscapes, you know, Google Earth and 3D kind of things like that. So we've definitely seen, you know, a lot of migration to that. So that's just a little bit of these of a site that's experience builder. And you'll notice this as you go, as you see these certain kind of buttons and the new icons, you know, you'll know right away, oh, that's an experience builder site. So we're seeing that as a big change in the industry. And you're going to start to notice that every time you see any sort of web application, or as you're putting web applications out, then you'll need to be looking at Experience Builder. So a couple other quick things I wanted to touch on too that are industry updates affecting GIS. This is one that is probably not affecting you as a user as much as it is the overall organization. And the reason I think this is important is because I think everybody's aware that Esri's changed their user types, but we've gone into a lot of organizations we're working with, and then we're seeing that there hasn't really been an audit of that, or a consideration of maybe some of these are overkill now and maybe some of these are not enough. So we see organizations carrying the certain advanced licensing that they don't necessarily need. So it's really worth going back and kind of looking at what you have. And now that they've migrated this, how does that, you know, affect the organization? So you can see, this is an older slide, but you can see what they were. There was a couple extras. They consolidated it into 6 user types. You know, editor was renamed to contributor. These are pretty much the same. We have creator and professional basic combined. And then, you know, your standard is your professional, your advanced is your professional plus. Okay, and this is a little more detail of you know, these sites, these slides are available online. You can go into Esri and pull these, but this is sort of the migration, right? You can see these two were combined. We have, you know, these other, you know, sort of, again, mobile worker is pretty much the same. Editor is just renamed. This one was combined. And then we have these sort of, you know, just renamed up here. Okay, but some of the functionality has switched over, and this is another great slide that gives us a little bit more detail, right? So we have really simple viewer licenses. We have where you can contribute, get out in the field and at it, and then where you can basically do everything to your professional plus and professional. So it's really good to kind of look through your organization and see, do you have people that aren't really needing professional plus licenses that have it? Or do you have people that really are in a creator but need professional plus? It's worth looking through. Esri Australia has a really good page on this that kind of really breaks down what the migration is and kind of how this has changed. It's not that complex as you see. Okay, we combined a couple and renamed a couple, but it's worth getting in because, again, what we've seen is in organizations, if you're not managing this or keeping an eye on it, then there can really be some waste or just inefficiencies in the licensing structure. So something to kind of go back and look at because that has been a big change in our industry. All right, and then the last thing I wanted to touch on that is something that I personally have seen everywhere, and I've seen this nationwide, and I think it's something that's worth addressing, is that we are seeing staffing challenges. Honestly, some of the counties in Ohio I've seen are doing a little better than I've seen nationwide in terms of hiring, but I've still seen it everywhere. There's a couple factors that I think are causing this, and I'll walk through kind of, what I've seen and what I think are the big things affecting this. So we have attrition, right? We have a generation, the baby boomer generation is getting into retirement age and retirement phase. And that's significant because the baby boomer generation was a generation that typically worked somewhere they were lifers, right? There was career loyalty kind of, we're losing people that have been not only with the organizations for long times, like sometimes 30, 40 years, but that also means they've seen the organization's trajectory and growth over those years. There's a wealth of knowledge in a lot of this generation retiring. They're long-term employees that have kind of built the initial systems, transitioned through the migrations, and really have a good understanding of a lot of this stuff that's going on and where the organization's going. Now, I've seen where that can create pros and cons. I've seen where, I won't name organizations, it's not in Ohio, but I'll tell you the state. I was in California, and there was a gentleman who built this legacy system, and it was a really good system. It's a great system for the time. But everything today has sort of evolved in the sense that all this customization, all these custom tools he built, I spent 5 hours going through every workflow with him at his computer. And what we found was that everything he was doing can now be handled out of the just native tools in Pro. But he was so, he had pride in this, and understandably so. It was his baby. He built it. And he was very adamant that the county could not do what they needed to do unless they kept these tools and kept this custom programming. And it was a really delicate thing because you didn't want to say, hey, you're wrong, what you're saying, and there was this pride in it. And sometimes we have that, like, right, if you've been there 30 years and you built these, I've seen it where it's a hindrance of moving forward, but also where it's a very big asset because of the knowledge that is carried and the understanding of years and years of systems and development and organization. And, I think we all know the person that has everything, you want them to write it all down because they know every aspect of the county in their head, but that's that, they win the lotto and they're gone, and that's a lot of information gone. So that is affecting offices. It's a big hole to fill for a lot of offices across the nation. And then sometimes they've done so much that you need two people to kind of replace. So we're seeing that a big generational retirement, right? Other big thing that we've seen is compensation. So I've seen, again, I do a lot in California. Cost of living there, as we all know, is crazy, right? Well, the entry level, the analyst positions, the drafter positions, the GIS tech positions haven't been adjusted in years, and you can't live in some places on those salaries, or they're just not attractive enough to hire or to bring in the talent that's needed. So what I've seen is a lot of offices are making concerted efforts right now to reclassify those positions and bring in talent. But as you all know, that's a challenge, right? Asking for more money. Not everybody sees that, or the board might not, or whoever, might not see the need for that or the value of those positions. So that's making it harder to attract that talent. And then in conjunction with that, the pandemic effect. So the pandemic opened up a world of remote work. And it also, what I've noticed is, I don't know any of you who do hiring, but I, do a lot of interviewing and hiring. And I've seen for years now this kind of trend where a lot of younger talent coming out has sort of just been job hopping. And I see resumes constantly now where it's like, all right, 1 year, 6 months, 2 years, 1 year. And then, as somebody hiring, you're like, okay, are you going to stay? Am I going to invest in onboarding and bring somebody in? And then you're going to, in a year, hop to something else. And then, of course, the remote work opened up a lot of opportunities for people that weren't available before. So it's really made it harder for local government to compete with these options in the private sector, and with all these, to retain the talent, right? A lot of times when we've seen this for years, I think it's even more prevalent now, is you get somebody who's coming into the workforce, they come into the local government, they get some training, and then they stay for a year or two, and then they leave and go to the private sector, or they're leveraging that for another job. It's hard to retain the good talent, especially if you can't pay them as much, et cetera. So, with all these options and remote options that opened up, and that kind of trend of, I don't like the position, I'll go find something else. Those things have made it harder to staff. And then another thing that we're seeing is less drafters, just, from the mapping side, where we really like, where Bruce Harris and Associates typically lives is in that, cadastral world. And so we're working with a lot of mapping departments and a lot of mappers, and particularly in mapping departments, you used to have a lot of people come out of school as drafters, that they took drafting classes. That's what they wanted to do. I think what you're seeing now is a lot of people that are getting into GIS and those kind of things in school are really intrigued by the analysis, the model building, the application development. Programming has become a much more ubiquitous and wide sort of discipline that a lot more younger kids are getting into. So instead of drafting, some of them, there's more of a programming and wanting to build and develop. I think there's just less interest in pure drafting, what we've seen. And so again, hiring somebody to come in and do map updates and just draw has been harder and harder. So I don't know if you guys are seeing this in your offices, but my core states are Ohio, Florida, Illinois, and California. And then I'm in a lot of other states as well, but those are kind of our core. Everywhere I go, I walk into offices and I hear them talking about this. Even in the private side, I see where it's been a lot of job shifting over the last few years since the pandemic, making it very challenging. This is a very real thing affecting our industry, because it's creating, there's a lot of jobs out there because people are having a hard time filling those jobs, but it's creating the need to rely on more technology, rely on more third-party sources, and all those things that are happening that are changing sort of the dynamic that we're used to within the offices. So these are all things that are kind of happening as we're talking, that are in motion, but are truly affecting, the local government offices and people that are doing GIS. So I know I'm about 5 minutes over time. I know we started a little late, but that's really kind of what I had to share today. I'll open it up for questions now, but before I do that, I just again want to say thank you so much for having me, and it's an honor and a privilege to be here with y'all.
Thanks, Brandon. Like you said, we're going to have the chat here open for any questions if anybody's got anything. Andrew Wilson asked early on, what's ArcGIS Pro? Might be some more questions filtering in after those topics. We've got David typing as well. So can you see the chat, Brandon? Or
Yep, I can. I just switched my screen. What's ArcGIS Pro? Oh,
let's answer it for Andrew. So he was kidding, but it'll lighten the mood a little bit.
Okay. Well, I never know. It's kind of funny because typically I assume that, you know, everybody knows what these things are. But again, with this attrition, I do a lot of teaching legal descriptions. And I always walk in and I'm like, all right, well, these are people that have been mapping. Well, I'm finding more and more. I've got people that are like, I worked at a car dealership and I've never done this. And, you know, yeah, I can share this with everybody. Absolutely, David. That's no problem. I'll share this link with Asa and Gabriel, and then they can disseminate to the group if that works. And I think we recorded it too, so you should just be maybe share that. But yeah, it's you know, you never know what your audience is. There's people coming in this industry with zero background and really would ask that question, like, what's pro? I mean, I'd be shocked at this day and age if somebody didn't know at this point. But yeah, that's what we're seeing in the industry. People are coming in green. I did a legal description course a couple weeks ago, and I think I had, out of the 30 students, I had 12 of them that were either within their first year in the office. So, you know, just lots of new people coming in and that didn't have that background in GIS. So it was like, you know, all right, I got half a class that's brand new. So you just never know where the level of the audience is. So any other questions?
I'll go ahead and segue. I do have a question. We've been looking at a lot into the AI side of legal descriptions and things of that nature.
Yep.
Not to kind of piggyback off of this presentation, but in regards to your one from legal descriptions, did you see any influence in using AI or it coming out?
Yes.
What can you touch on that?
That's a great question. So I guess that's the glaring omission from this is obviously one of the biggest things in every conference we go to right now. One of the biggest things in our industry is AI, right? That is absolutely affecting us. Every conference I go to now is talking about AI. AI is such a wide breadth of capability. And, you know, I left that out because there's just so many components of AI and where it can come in. But yeah, that's a huge part affecting us. So what I've seen for years, we talked about, actually, there's a startup company. I won't name the name, but they're in Ohio. They're everywhere. And the CEO of that company is a friend of mine. I remember, you know, when he started it, I was reviewing his business plan and going through things. And he and I were talking about, because he was getting involved with AI and machine learning. And I always had this vision of doing automated deed reading using OCR and creating a vector of the deed, right, of the legal. And to me, that's huge. It's downstream, you know, tremendous efficiencies and gains, but it's also, you know, for a developer or an attorney, they can review it before it's even submitted and see, oh, hey, this doesn't close or there's an issue, right? It can just save a lot of trouble. So about 2 years ago, a company called White Star came to the UC and had this technology. Now, again, I like to compare it to the bag cell phone, right? We're at the very early, you know, adaptation of this kind of technology. So where it'll be in 10 years from here is going to be, you know, I don't even think we can fathom it. But so as often is the case, and we even joked about this, we're like, well, do we want to necessarily invest in building this? Because then Esri will probably just take it and put it in their stuff. And that's kind of exactly what happened. So Esri has been showing a lot and demoing this a lot, that they have a deed reader in 3.5. So as part of Pro. Now, that being said, what I've seen and been hearing is that it's still a little wonky. You know, like anything, when Esri does a canned demo, it works great. It's amazing. Everything's perfect. But in the real world, when you take real data and you go to use it, it can be a little more complicated. I think we're a version away from where that's really going to be, you know, a really useful tool, but we're getting there, and it will be. And what it'll do is OCR, you know, obviously deeds that go back, you know, pre-1970s and are in chains or reference kind of those where, you know, the old oak tree was, that's going to be a lot harder for it to, you know, give you a really accurate vector drawing from AI. But as you get into the more modern stuff, I think you can get very accurate with that. And so I'm excited to see it's in its early phases. Esri has that functionality being released in 3.5. lots of bugs in 3.5. We have backed a few of our clients who've gone to 3.5, out of 3.5. Asa, I think you know that personally. We've seen this happen a few times, and there's always been that kind of let Esri put their bug patches out and then migrate first, give it that time. And I think we're in that little bit of a phase. We've seen there's a few things. Yes, absolutely. So that's why I teach the classes. I literally teach mapping if you didn't have computers, how to do the trig, how to do all that. And people are like, well, why do I need to know this? Because I can just do it on my computer. I'm like, you can. But again, that's exactly why we don't want to lose the ability to know how to do it and understand why it's, how to read the legals and how to actually map them out manually. But yes, James mentioned that AI knowledge drains, like the spell check, right? Nobody actually remembers how to type anything anymore because it's just automated and does it for us. Well, once we let AI read all our legals, who's going to actually be able to read legals down the road? So there's still that human element that's critical. And again, like I said, you're going to get deeds, you're going to get old ones, your reference deeds and stuff that AI is just, I don't think, going to meet the challenge, because I don't care how much machine learning you do, when you get to some of those old legals, they're unique, and there's nothing that it was trained to know where John Smith shot the bear by the creek, right? There's just those, we know you get in those old legals, and there's some crazy descriptions that are more of an art form than a science, right? So how it'll handle those, is yet to be determined. I'd ask colleagues and see if anybody's played with it yet. This is the long answer. The short answer is yes, that technology is there. It's being released. I don't know if I would recommend totally relying on it yet, but get in there and play with it and see. And I think in a few releases, we will be at a point where, you're just feeding deeds in and it's spitting out a vector, and you send that down to mapping and et cetera, et cetera.
You're exactly right on the 3.5, and I jumped the gun on that. I'm not gonna lie. I was excited to see the Cogo reader, and
you're not the only one. You're not the only one.
Jason and the guys down at BHA, they're like, never upgrade to a solid test. Always wait for the patches. I didn't listen.
That's okay. It's one of those, you learn from it, and like I said, you're not the only one. We have we kind of had a bunch of clients do that, and we're like, well, we just pushed the 3.5, but now we got all this broken stuff. We're like, let's move it back. Wait for a few of these, bug fixes and patches to come out, and then from there, I think everything will stabilize. And we see this a lot with the new releases. It's not an uncommon thing.
And I'm with James as well. I'm hesitant on the AI stuff. We are employing some of it here in the map office. And the thing that kind of brings me a little bit of like a safety net is, with it being machine learning, someone's going to have to teach it how to get better. So there is that timeline where you are teaching the computer what to do, your agent, whatever scary word you want to use. So there's going to be a little bit of some of that, people knowing how to read legals to train. But I mean, at some point, it's possible you don't need us. And some things, you'll need that human element, but some things I'm not so sure. Like you said, we can't fathom what's going to happen next year, let alone 10 years.
Right. It's wild times. Somebody asked me, do you see AI as an opportunity or a threat? And I said, well, it's both. I said, it's, I think it's both. It just depends. There's certainly huge opportunities, but there's huge risks, right? Huge components of unknown. And obviously there's, your Terminator 2 extreme AI risk, right? But even, kind of the joking aside, absolutely, we're going to see jobs shift. I think there's always going to be a human element. Actually, quick anecdote, but it's kind of funny. I mentioned I teach the legal descriptions. So yes, you are the beta tester with Esri. That's right. They let us find that's exactly right. That's the model. And, so a lot of times people just wait to be the beta tester. But so real quick, I do these legal descriptions, okay, courses. And one of them is there's one I do in Florida, and it's 4 separate courses. And one of the courses is a week-long course that is just pretty much straight trig, geometry, and algebra. And every time I get in and do the courses, I go through and I just, walk through a couple of the, oblique triangles and everything just to, refresh myself before I get in and teach. And this last course, I just wanted to try it. And I was like, I want to spit one of these into Chat GPT and see what it does and see if it solves this triangle for me. So I took an oblique triangle and I threw it in Chat GPT, and I'm watching it process, and it's going through, and I'm like, well, rounding errors here. This is right. I'm kind of catching this. Well, then I see it totally make a mistake, and it's just trying to figure it out. And it's like, this is an invalid triangle. And it says it to me, and I had to go in. And it's kind of what you said, Asa. Like, we have to, like, this is just trig. It's not like the delicate science of boundaries and location and markers and those kind of things, right? It's trig. It's straightforward. But I noticed it switched from the law of sines to the law of cosines during this, and I'm like, you can't do that. You got to stay consistent. So I'm like, I literally got into Chat GPT, and I'm like, well, you just switched laws in the middle of this. You're not supposed to do that. And Chat GPT's like, oh, thank you. Yes, very good observation. Then it redid it, and it's like, okay, great. You helped me solve this. And I'm like, I'm teaching Chat GPT how to do trig. It's just we always say, especially with a discipline like GIS, right? You go in and put something in there. I've put code, like to, get code from GPT, but then you still got to go through and kind of modify that and massage it. I think that human element is still critical. And like you said, Asa, it's going to learn. Like, it probably now knows that, okay, I'm not going to switch laws doing in the same triangle, and fix that going forward. But I was shocked at this point, ChatGPT didn't already know that. So, we've seen this, and I have a colleague and a coworker of mine who's a technical expert, and I pulled some stuff off ChatGPT, and I said, hey, all right, I got this from ChatGPT. I want you to look through it now. And he was like, yes, it's not good. He's like, it's okay. And if somebody didn't know and didn't have the expertise, they might, it's legit. He's like, but when you really know, no, this has to change. This isn't right. So I don't think we can rely on it to just solve our problems and rely on it completely. Again, who knows where it'll go and where it'll be in 10, 15 years. But, it still lacks in a lot of things that we have, knowledge and discipline in our industry built that we've built over years. And, so AI is a great tool, but if you just rely on it, you ever seen a paper somebody writes and doesn't go back with the human element and fix it, it's never totally right. So again, it'll get there, I'm sure, but these things have to be trained.
Yeah, good points in there. I know we kind of digressed a little bit from the industry updates, but if anybody else has any questions, throw them down in the chat. This has been great, Brandon. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to visit here with us and present. Brandon is correct. We'll publish this on YouTube. It's been recorded. But yeah, before we close out, if there's any more straggler questions, post them down there in the chat. And we'll give that a couple of seconds here if nobody else. Like I said, Brandon, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for everything. There was some stuff in there that I wasn't even aware of. So it's good to learn. And that's all. That's what CGAO is. We're learning. We're a community, and we're talking like this. So this was fantastic, and we appreciate you being here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be here, and that's kind of what I wanted to do. Is some of it I wanted to cater to very specific things, but also some of it is that's what we're here to do. This organization is built to share knowledge amongst colleagues, right? So some of that staffing stuff I've seen, that's just stuff I've picked up on and seen as kind of a ubiquitous trend in our industry, and so I wanted to share that. This is what this is. It's all about getting out there and talking and sharing with each other. So, thank you.
All right. Well, if there's no further questions, Brandon, thanks again. It was a pleasure. And I'm sure maybe we'll have you back on here again. Some of your legal description stuff will be fun to hear about.
Oh, yeah. You guys want to have some fun.
An hour worth of trig might not be the case, but something.
I don't know if I do that to you guys. But I have done, I did one for a California educational group and did just like an hour presentation of a crash course of here's the components when you're reading legal. So it's not like, yeah, we're going to dive into doing trig, but okay, here's a high level of what meets and bounds is. Here's a high level of what the public land survey system is. Asa, we could talk offline, and I'm always happy to contribute and support the organizations. Oh yeah, converting, rods, chains, that throws people, that literally explodes heads. And I'm like, once you really know how to approach it, it's not that bad. But rods and chains for some reason just messes with people. So we could do that. You just let me know, and I'm happy to support.
Outstanding. Well, thanks again, Brandon. Thanks everybody for being in this and participating. And hope everybody has a great rest of their day. James, we'll get the links out there for you. Don't worry.